Okay, now that I've installed Chrome, let's go ahead and run a couple of benchmarks. While in the background an update to Big Sur is downloading. Before we run any benchmarks, let's do my favorite thing and automatically hide and show the dock. That way when I'm using two monitors, I can have the dock wherever I need it to be. And it also doesn't take up that much space, or any space. Okay, so first, let's run a web benchmark that I like. It's called Octane. Gives a good feeling about how good the JavaScript execution engine is. Now, just for context, on my MacBook Pro 16-inch, the Intel with 8 cores, I get about 45,000, give or take. Maybe 49 some days. I have to rerun it, but let's just say about 45,000, and I'm getting 63,000 on this benchmark, which is pretty insane. Let's run it again, and this is in Chrome, the Apple Silicon optimized version. This benchmark is testing the speed of the JavaScript engine, which is critical to the modern web. So it's going to give you a really good indication of how zippy web pages are going to be, especially really complicated single page applications. 62,653. Now let's see how well Safari performs. Let's close that out. Let's completely close out of Chrome. All right. And the Chrome web browser scored about 63,000. Let's just say 63,000. Let's see if the Safari web browser does any better. If I remember correctly, it does run better, or faster, I should say, on this test than Chrome. No. Huh. That's interesting. 61,622. Yesterday when I tested this, there was like a 5 to 10,000 point delta between Safari performance and Chrome performance under this Octane JavaScript test. Now today, there's no difference, and I'm wondering if it's because Google has, in the last day, updated. Okay, that's more like what I expected. I wonder if Google has updated their browser within the last day, because before they put up their Apple Silicon optimized version, their ARM version, Then they had to take it down because it was crashing. Then they put it back up. But Chrome and Safari are in the same ballpark. Let me run this one more time, just to get a good feeling for where it really is. But I have the feeling that Safari and Chrome are going to be performing about equally, which is pretty good because I am a Chrome person. Safari is a good browser. As a matter of fact, it's a great browser, but it's not platform independent, and I can log on to Chrome and have all my bookmarks and everything all synced up. Okay, so looks like Safari and Chrome are neck and neck with Octane, so that's a good measure of their JavaScript performance. Now let's test out the web speedometer, which basically simulates a web application. Now, when I tested Safari the first day, I had a MacBook Air, the M1 MacBook Air, scored like 220. And again, for context, my 16-inch MacBook Pro with 8 cores that cost me almost $3,000 gets 130 on this benchmark. At this point, the only reason that I'm not selling my Intel Mac is for two things. First of all, it boots into boot camp. Second, it runs Docker and it runs under boot camp. I can run AAA games, and I have a video on that. If you look right here, you can see it. Okay, so 215. Let's test that again. 215 is still a phenomenal score, but I think it can do better. So for doing things on the web, as far as web performance, you pretty much can't beat the M1 chip right now. 222, and I think it's going to score in the 220s if I run it again. I wonder if it just had to warm up and kind of do some kind of just-in-time compile with the JavaScript code. Either way you cut it, it's super fast. Macs would make the M1 chip would make a great Chromebook. 221. Okay. Now let's close out of Safari. Crack open the Chrome browser and see how it does on speedometer. Browserbench.org. I have the feeling they're going to be about the same, so that's definitely a plus, because there's no reason now from a performance perspective for me to go over to Safari. The only thing else I can think of is if Chrome is still somehow a battery hog, even though it's optimized for M1. But I don't think it'll be. I think it'll run well under M1 and be a good energy citizen. $214. Let's test that again, and I'm wondering if it'll be faster the second time around. These M1 chips are pretty amazing. And I think I'm not going to regret taking back the MacBook Air and getting the Pro just for the fan, because I don't hear the fan. It's completely silent. 216. Some Geekbench benchmarks. First for the CPU. I'm going to run this with the CPU architecture Apple Silicon, just so we can see how fast the processor is. At full speed. I'm then going to run the benchmark using the Intel architecture, so that we can see how much of a performance hit Rosetta is on the MacBook Pro. I'm guessing it's going to be like a 40% performance hit. I don't know that for a fact, I'm just guessing. But I'm running Geekbench 5, which is pretty standard, quick and dirty way to know how powerful your computer is. It's cross-platform. It runs on everything from Android to Windows machines. I wonder if I could actually download the iOS version of Geekbench and run it on this machine. That would be interesting. Okay, so we're almost done, and the benchmarks that I've been seeing should put the single core at around 1700 and the multi-core at around 7700. Okay, so here's the final result: 1720 and 7327. Let's upload this. And let's compare it to some other devices. I'll make the font a little bigger, because if I'm having a hard time seeing it, I imagine you are too. Okay, so I scored 1720, which should put me on the top of this stack. I'm only looking at Mac stuff, but it looks like all the Apple M1s are on the top of the heap for Apple, with scores from 1702 to 1688. And the Intel Mac that is right under this is the iMac with the 10th gen, looks like 8-core processor. But that's a big drop. It goes down to 1249 for the single core Geekbench. So these entry-level MacBooks are beating out desktop processors, as these are low-power entry-level MacBooks. They're replacing the Mac Mini, which is an entry-level product, and replacing the MacBook Air, which is an entry-level product, and they're replacing the MacBook Pro 13-inch, which is an entry-level product. So that's pretty impressive. Let's take a look at multi-core scores. Now, multi-core, you have all these multi-$1,000, these $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 machines that are beating it out. But when you get down here to a iMac Pro from 2017, is scoring 7981, which is a fair bit above the Mac Mini, but bear in mind the Mac Mini is a $700 computer, and this is probably a couple $1,000s. So that's pretty impressive. So you have a MacBook Air and MacBook Pros, these entry-level products that are within striking distance, so to speak, of a MacBook Pro. And it looks like they beat out all the other Intel laptops. So this is the fastest Intel laptop that we have. So I believe my MacBook Pro is a late 2019 with 8 cores. It's a 16-inch. So these entry-level M1 products are beating out the MacBook Pro in multi-core performance. That's pretty incredible. So for $1,300, I can get faster multi-core processing than a $2,700 laptop. Okay. That is most impressive. Now let's run it under Intel and see what impact that has on the Geekbench result. Like I said, I think that the Rosetta translation is probably the Intel translation is probably going to give us a 40% hit on performance. I don't know that for a fact. I'm just sort of guessing based on the emulation that I've seen on the Windows on ARM machines. It just looks like emulation. That's the tax. That's the price that you pay. But because these machines are so much faster with their single core, even emulated, the programs may run faster emulated just because this processor is so much faster than the other Intel processors. So Apple's claim that some programs might run better under emulation than they do on the real Intel silicon could be true. Just based on what I've seen running Visual Studio Code in emulation, I can tell it's a little sluggish in some places, but for the most part, it runs fine. I ran Office in emulation, and it too seems pretty fair. No real problems there. So I think for the typical person, as long as you're not buying a Mac to run Windows through boot camp, as long as that's not a part of your workflow, you should be good to go. Okay. So we can see that Rosetta, we can see the impact of running under Rosetta. So I said that would be a 40% hit, and it looks like I was wrong. So 1240 divided by 1720 is 72. So there's a 28% hit on the single core, and 5416 divided by 7327, and there's a 26% hit on multi-core. So let's just average it out and call it 27%. So that's not bad at all, because even though there's a 27% decrease in performance overall for running under Rosetta, because this processor is so much faster, this 1240 score on Geekbench, did I close it? Yes, I think I did. But my point is that this 1240 score is higher than many, or in the same ballpark as many of the Intel Macs. So I really don't think that most people see a difference, other than initially when you start up the program, it's doing some magic in the background. I think it's actually translating the code and recompiling it for ARM in the background. So that's pretty impressive. So I have BioShock 2 fired up in the background. This is just so we can get an idea of how smoothly or not smoothly the game runs under Rosetta. Looks pretty good so far. Looks like it's running at least 30 frames a second. Textures look real good. Water effects are really nice. It's running really smoothly. So I wonder what the quality levels are. Like I said, it seems to be running really smoothly. I haven't run into any action yet to really get an idea what's happening. Looks like it automatically brought the resolution down to 840 by 525. That's pretty low, but it looks fine. Just for fun, let's try to push up the graphics. Let's push it up to 720. Still looks smooth. Special effects look nice. I've never played this game before, so forgive me, I'm just exploring. Twisting around looks pretty straightforward, and the frame rate seems to hang on, to hold up. Okay, let's try pushing the graphics up some more. Push it up to 1920 by 1080, but since it's widescreen, I guess it's 1920 by 1200. I guess the game is trying to, it defaulted to this really low resolution, but I assume that it did that because it's running in emulation, and it looked around and basically said, oh, I'm running in this weird environment. I have no idea how fast I can go. So I'm gonna set the game to this super low resolution, but I'm at 1080p right now, or 1920 by 1200 actually, because this is 16 by 10 aspect ratio. Seems to be running pretty smoothly.
for such a long time, and Eleanor has missed you. Find her and you'll be all better. Daddy!
Saying, true and righteous are your judgments. Teach me of these.
Okay. Let's push the graphics up. Let's push it up to native resolution and see what happens. Still running smooth. I do realize this is an old game, but it's been remastered, so the textures should be pretty demanding. Looks like it's running at least 30 frames a second. Okay, that's enough wandering around Rapture.